Are you ready to embark on a transformative journey of rebuilding your life? Look no further than the Rebuild Podcast. Join us as we dive deep into conversations that nurture personal and spiritual growth. Through the wisdom of the Word of God and practical applications, we'll guide you towards becoming the best version of yourself. On this podcast, we will delve into a variety of topics and insights, ranging from mental and emotional well-being to personal development and spiritual growth. Together, we'll explore the paths to healing, resilience, and the restoration of inner peace. Subscribe now and let's rebuild our lives together, one uplifting conversation at a time.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rebuild Podcast. I am your host, Sean Romy, and today I would like to talk about finding our calling. In particular, how faith can guide our career path. I think this is a very essential subject to be talked about because we're talking about, being able to find our meaning in life. This is one of those subjects, if you will, that has a lot of, questions regarding what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to do them, and things along that line. And I think for many of us, we're caught in the hamster wheel of life. We kind of take on things and do things because that's what we're told, and sometimes we never really find our true purpose in life, our true meaning in life. And I want us to be able to find that. So find what it is we're supposed to do and allowing it to line up with our faith, as well as how to navigate through that, in terms of whether or not we put it into the workforce or, just, again, serve God's will. But let's go ahead and get it right into it. I don't want to waste any time. I don't want to, drag it out too far. So let's get into discovering the deeper purpose within. And we can go into Proverbs chapter 29 and verse 18, where it says, "Where there is no vision, the people perish. But he that keepeth the law, happy is he." In the grand scheme of this verse, as a standalone, you're talking about, not having a certain idea of what you want to do, right? Not having a vision, not having a plan, not having an idea, not having a sense of direction. And this is tied into our purpose, not society's purpose, not society's mission, not society's goal. Okay. We tend to perish. And the reason we perish is, again, we're without a sense of direction. And so we'll follow whatever is in front of us. And that usually leads us to finding some of the issues and problems right there. And we're empty and we're unfulfilled. We're dissatisfied because, basically we're just doing what we have to do to, quote, survive. But he that keepeth the law, happy is he. You're talking about now finding that purpose, right? Our purpose is found in fulfilling God's law, God's will and purpose. Now, I'm not speaking cliche, you got to do the religious stuff. What I mean by that, in this regard, he that keepeth the law, happy is he. Understanding, again, God's will and purpose and what that entails and how we go about fulfilling it. We'll be happy because we're able to do what we're purposed to do, and we're not going against God's will. That's more along the lines of what that's referring to. So then how do we find our life's purpose or discover our calling? When we get into finding our life's purpose or discovering what our call is, we have to look at the things around us that seem to kind of be very commonplace, if you will. When you go to certain places, how do how are you received when you come across in certain places? How are your interactions with others? What are the things that drive you? What are the things that motivate you? What are the things that grind your gears or get you in a place where you're seeking for certain things? And the same thing with the calling. It's that same aspect. And a lot of us, when we think of our purpose or we think of our calling, a lot of us think that all of the aspects, the elements that make this thing stick out or stand out are going to be positive. They're always going to be, this great, awesome, wonderful thing. And if you notice, even with people outside of the body that do find their sense of purpose, quote unquote, if you will, a lot of them will tell you that their way to finding the success that they're looking for is solving a problem. And in serving God's will and purpose, in finding what we're supposed to do, what we're bringing to the table will also solve a problem. It's not necessarily going to be, something major all the time. It could be something small. It could be, just finding a niche that, a great example, you might have a passion for young men who, don't have a father figure. You take on the role of being a father figure. You're serving in your purpose. You could be the type of person that, you can find yourself being, great with children. You open a daycare. Simple as that. That's your purpose. You're able to instill values and qualities. Again, that's the thing that we're looking for. Right? It's not always going to have to be some over-the-top type of thing. Oh, we're finding the cure for cancer or something along that line. That's not to say that it's not going to happen. Pretty sure it will. But, we don't, sometimes when we think about those types of things, answering questions, or we think about the things that drive us or motivate us, or the things that are connected to us or tied to us, or the way people interact with us, we don't think of them as very significant things a lot of times. Because, again, the societal norm, right? You got to do what you got to do to survive. And that kind of takes away from us being able to see that. That's why, being able to practice from a faithful perspective, doing that inward search is going to help figure out and dictate how to find that place. And not just faith being able to identify what we can do or how we can do it, but it also allows us to recognize what those things are. Sometimes the very thing that, we might be running away from, the very thing that we might find ourselves saying, hey, this is not what, I want to do, or maybe this isn't going to work, or, something along that line. That might be the very thing that is your lane. And sometimes we get into a place too where we think the things that we're naturally gifted at or really good at might be the avenue. And the thing is sometimes that gifting is just a vehicle to get you to the purpose. I think of a lot of people that, I was influenced by in my younger years that, I could definitely say that that's definitely a thing. One of my favorite musicians is a pianist by the name of Ben Tankard. He was a guy that he wanted to play basketball. That was his thing. He didn't want, he really didn't want to be involved with a whole lot of other stuff. And it was an injury that he had during, I think it was either during training camp or during a pre-draft camp, something to that effect, that, altered his life forever. And that led him to finding his calling, which was music. He's made music for over 40 years now, and he's done a great job with it. He still has ties into the NBA, and that's great. But his calling was in that realm, in the realm of music. And again, he used the vehicle to get him where he needed to go, and whatever was necessary for him to land in the space that he was, to find the gift that he had. It became what it became. You think about other men and women in positions like that. Maya Moore is a great example, really, really good example of this. She was one who was in the WNBA at the time, and during her off seasons, I think she was either petitioning or she was practicing law, and she was taking on a case with a guy that was convicted of a crime and was actually in prison for a crime he didn't commit. They were able to fix that, and from that standpoint, she left the game, and that's her thing now. Has been in the realm of activism. It happens. You think of Jim Brown is another great example. Here's a guy that left his football career in the prime of his football days, and became an activist and an actor as well. You're talking about, we're not limited, or we're not just put into position with, just being able to stay in one path. You never know, right? But it's all about being able to take that step. And so, again, when we ask ourselves, or we try to navigate and figure out what it is we're thinking of in terms of fulfilling purpose, we have to ask ourselves, what are we passionate about? Right? What are the things that move us? What are the things that motivate us? What are the things that get us going? What are the things that we think about? And then, from there we ask ourselves, what kind of skills do we have on top of this? Do we have skills that enhance this? Do we have skills that can get us to other places? Do we have skills that, we might have to cultivate along the way? Like, whatever the case may be, we have to know those things, right? Because that's going to help us answer the last question, which is, how can we use them to make that positive impact, right? I think the way that, we learn throughout society in terms of how to get where we believe we're supposed to go, we oftentimes think that life is just going to be this beeline, if you will, getting us from point A to point B. Because we're often told, the straight line is the shortest path to get to where we need to go. But in all reality, life is full of twists and turns, right? We go through our ups and downs. We have our peaks and valleys. We have pivots. We can find ourselves going in a lot of different directions. And in doing so, we also have to come into the understanding that there's not going to be one way to get to where we're going. And everybody's path is not going to be the same. Speaking of, since I've been using a lot of basketball references or sports references, I think about a young man that played in the NBA some years ago, and his journey to the NBA was a really, really long one. He played in different minor leagues all across America, and he finally got his chance, and I remember people talking about his story. And he was in the league for a good little minute. It was good to hear. And I know for a lot of people that sounds very motivating, right? To get to, that opportunity. Now, his name was Jamario Moon, so if you want to go look him up, you can definitely go look him up. But he played in a lot of different leagues prior to getting into the NBA, chasing after that dream. And it's okay, where, we think most of the time your path to the NBA is going to be, if you're not highly recruited and you're not, that guy going into college, you can't get into the league. Or if you're not considered one of the guys they talk about on TV and you can't make it. And that's not entirely true. There are guys that are working hard all the time, and everybody's story is different. It's not going to be the same. Some guys have redemption stories and a whole bunch of other things. And I'm sorry that I'm sticking on the sports path. It's the one that kind of really stuck out to me when I first started the message. So just bear with me on that one. But that can be said for anything, right? I think of Clifton Davis. Sometimes I get confused with Clifton Davis and Clifton Powell. But Clifton Davis is an actor turned pastor, turned minister, if you will. And it was actually one of his roles that he was playing in that kind of pushed him along that path into ministry. And it just, again, these things can happen that way. You never know what kind of opportunities can or will present themselves just from, following your path, your journey, right? And the beauty of it is when you find yourself connecting your work to your purpose, the opportunities will be easier for you to recognize, especially when you're stepping out on faith, because you know what you're trying to do and you know where you're trying to go. And sometimes those things that you might have thought were the vehicles to get you where you wanted to go might change over time. Again, you look at the examples that we just used, and sometimes it might not even be that. You think about David as a great example. He was a shepherd before he became king, and most people didn't even expect him to go out and be the guy that he was going to be in taking on Goliath, because he wasn't of a particular size, right? You think about him being in a position where they just overlooked him, but he fought lions and tigers and bears taking care of sheep. So he was accustomed to having to deal with and having to face that kind of danger on a regular basis. And it's that position, it's that work that he dealt with, that he was in, that pushed him and propelled him into his place of purpose. That, along with obviously his love for God. But you can tell that what he was doing when he's put in the situation allows him to become who he needs to become. You think about Joseph, right? The Joseph with the coat of many colors. Same thing. He was, enslaved. He was, jailed. He was accused. He was lied on, and all of these other things. And in that process, all of what he was having to experience cultivated him, allowed him to be humble, put him in positions where he was then presented to the Pharaoh and helped them to be prepared for a famine that saved millions and millions of lives. That's powerful, and you think about all of the vehicles that it took him to get to that place. It comes with the territory. And for us, that could be the same thing. Yeah, you look at the dynamic of maybe I'm working at a fast food restaurant right now, but it might be necessary for you to learn how to be, in that place, because where you might be going next might be a fast-paced environment. And so you're going to have to know how to be effective in managing X, Y, and Z all at the same time. You could find yourself in a place where maybe you're picking up parts at a store, and that could be something to help you at the next level of wherever it is you go, to pay attention to detail, right? To devise a system to be able to push and persuade and to navigate and to influence in a certain kind of way. And when we start to see those things in that place, in that manner, it allows us to be opened up to a career calling. And that career calling is realistically an intersection of our passion, our gifts, and our opportunities. Again, the giftings or the skills might be the vehicle to get us to a specific place. And the passion might be something that is along that path we might think is a detour, but that might be the way to go. And that detour is the opportunity that gets us, to become who we need to become. Right? But it allows for all of those things to work together, again, in its appropriate timing and place, so that we can cultivate and become who we need to become. And one of the ways we can navigate through this, and I know it's pretty cliche because it's Bible talk and all, but prayer and meditation, and more so with the focus on discerning what God's guidance is for our lives. Right? When we ask God to help us, to reveal to us, to show us things that are necessary for us to become who we need to become, again, it's a beautiful thing because it's self-reflection. Okay? We don't want to put outside influence in a position to really dictate to us what we have to find out ourselves. Now, this is different from seeking guidance. Guidance should really help us in being able to navigate and shed light on what would, again, be what's necessary to get us going where we need to go. But it's not supposed to be directly telling us this is what we're supposed to do, unless that's God's will. And believe me, that's not always going to happen that way. But when we're talking again, when we're asking God for that guidance, when we're asking for that discernment and understanding what that voice is, it'll become clearer to us. Right? We'll start to notice the things that stick out. You can look back at certain moments and you can tell, right, where you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to be there. In different places that I've been, I've met people who, they were right where they needed to be. I've had teammates that have become coaches and they deserve to be there because they have great influence with those guys. They have great knowledge of the game, even if opportunities might not allow them to showcase that with their own, maybe with their own abilities, but they have great basketball minds. I have, former coaches that, again, same thing, are in great spots. I think about people that I've known in, just in school in general. There are guys that are running their own companies in some great places. You have some people that are, very influential. You have guys that have gone out and, tapped in different fields and become very influential in a lot of ways. And it's awesome to see. I've had, friends and shipmates that I've met in the Navy and other branches of the military too, that, you can tell that the military is where they need to be. They're great in terms of influence. They're great in terms of leadership and motivation. Their understanding of how to follow the mission. They know how to navigate the ins and outs of what it is to be a service member. And even in ministry, the formal aspect, I guess you would call of ministry. You have men and women who, they really have a care about the people. They're really concerned about the movement of God, moving the movement in the right direction. You're talking about people who are genuine about fulfilling Christ's will and purpose. That makes sense, right? And we want to be in that place, right? We want to find ourselves connected as such. And again, all of our life paths are different when we get to the certain places where we connect with other people that'll help us, kind of get to that understanding, if you will. But when you see it, you can tell when a person's locked in where they need to be. That's exactly, again, where they need to be. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's a beautiful feeling, And there is a difference between when we, find that thing. Because when we find it, there's a joy, there's a happiness, it's almost like, one of those moments, like, for example, you're playing a game and you finally, you're finally able to beat the level that you didn't beat after, multiple tries, or, maybe you're just having that day where everything just seems to go the way that you want it to go. Like that kind of feel is just like, wow, that kind of thing. And when you find it again, there's no turning back. Now it does, again, it comes with growth and development and things along that line, but you found it. And like I said, in those atmospheres and in those arenas and avenues, I've met a lot of people that they were in the right place. Some people find their calling after a few mistrials and mishaps and obstacles and failures along the way, and again, that's okay. That's all a part of the process too, right? Some people, are resilient in the standpoint that they can teach you how to bounce back from failure. And that failure might be the thing that turns them into a success. I'll learn how to bounce back. It happens. Speaking of, when we get into the dynamic of obstacles and doubts and journeys along the way, there's going to be a lot of that, right? You're going to deal with a lot of questions and concerns and issues because we're thinking what mainstream society says. It's got to pay well. You're thinking about fulfillment and happiness and your own personal things, right? Oh, will I have time and opportunity to be with people that matter, or have time to myself and things along that line. All of those things are important. And again, when balancing faith and work, we definitely want to make sure that we're putting together an opportunity for fulfillment on all sides. And I'm not saying that you have to necessarily compromise, but you do have to find that space where you understand that what you're doing is supposed to be tied and attached to God's will and purpose. So if it's not getting you, if that's not where you are in this moment, then it's either a preparation for you to get to the next phase, or it's not what you need. Again, that's where that's where the discernment and guidance and the prayer comes into play, where we can, ask God for clarity, because we don't want to make that wrong decision, especially when you're talking about fulfilling will and purpose, right? Because we definitely don't want to find ourselves having to spend time and energy doing something that it's going to be difficult for us to get out of. And I've worked a few jobs like that over the course of my time. And, even during my time in the military, there were some points where I wanted to get out quickly. And, short of going really deep left center field, to the point of no return, there were times where I thought about compromising, the career that I had built by just making some really dumb decisions. And from that place, just being able to process out that way. But then, what good would that do me if I'm not able to fulfill everything else that I need to fulfill? Like, we don't want to do that. That's another one of those challenges too, right? Because that discernment will allow us to really see, okay, we might want this because this is difficult for us, but there's something there, something necessary. And when you have that discernment, again, you're able to embrace the process, and you go from there. Joshua 1:9 is great in referencing this, and if you know it, and it says that, have I not commanded thee, be strong and of good courage, be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. For the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. Right? And no matter what happens in the process, God is going to make sure that we fulfill what we need to fulfill. We need to go through what we need to go through. We need to, we process the things that we need to process. And rightfully so. Like, God shows us in many different aspects of His Word that we're not going to, fail. Rightfully so. And rightfully so. When we talk about, finding ourselves in that place, well, how do we know if we're doing the right thing, if we're going in the right direction? You seek mentorship. And again, you don't allow the mentorship to forcibly tell you something. You're looking for mentorship to guide you in a certain direction. And usually the direction that they should be guiding you in is the direction that is in alignment with what God's purpose is. Right? Because the last thing you really want to do is allow for someone else to dictate to you what you have to do or what you need to do for perception's sake. 20 years ago, I was, in the process. I had applied for a bunch of different schools, some big ones, some small schools, some community colleges, and in the same token, I was being recruited by a couple of schools. And one of the schools I went, we were doing workouts, and they had actually had me, as well as two of my teammates on their roster. We were going to, they were going to give us an opportunity to be a part of the school. I had applied, I got accepted, and the coach at the time was talking about a particular program where my school was going to be paid for my entire 4 years. So I would do the 2 years at the community college, and then I would transfer to another school, which was maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours away. And I would go there, and I would finish my degree program with that school. I'd be on scholarship, so I wouldn't have to worry about anything else other than maintaining grades. But if I wanted to, say, walk onto a basketball team, I could do that. The way I played and, the things that, I was wanting to do, I'm pretty sure I didn't have a problem being able to do that. But, that was my thinking. My school will be paid for. I'm good. And I ended up having a conversation with a teacher, maybe graduate. And she sat me down, and she was basically kind of grilling me behind why I would choose to go to a junior college, vice this prestigious school, where the reason that I was going, which most people kind of knew, again, me being the basketball player I was going for the sake of basketball. And at the time, I really didn't know how to speak up for myself. And this is one of those things that I kind of learned on the back end. But in that process, kind of convinced me otherwise to not follow the decision that I was really going to make. And when I made that decision, I don't regret it from the standpoint of what I needed to get, but I did regret it from the standpoint that I allowed someone else, and I allowed, not just her decision, but I allowed everyone else's, pressure and influence to really affect my decision. And in doing so, it really, I was really upset behind it. I went through a lot of depression. I went through a lot of ups and downs behind it. And I do remember, after years of just the ups and downs, I said to myself, if I ever have an opportunity to come back and do this again, I'm taking charge. I'm putting matters into my own hands. I'm going to, do X, Y, and Z. And so that's, that is my end goal now. And I'm looking forward to being able to take that direction and doing that. But I am kind of sad that it really took me 20 years to go through all of that, to get back to this point. That was pretty frustrating. That part, I will say that I do regret. Right, but again, that is, again, one of those reasons, as a caution for those of you that might find yourself in that place. I do say you definitely want to make sure that you don't want your influence to force you into a position that you're not supposed to be, or making a decision that ultimately you're going to have to deal with. Right? Once everybody accepted that I was going to make what seemed to be the quote smart decision, I was left alone. There was no issue, no problem. But when I look back at it and I think bigger picture, I put myself in a lot of debt. Now I made, I had some friends that I made along the way. I did learn some things. I did build a lot of confidence because of certain opportunities that were presented to me. But I will say, even still, in retrospect, I should, I probably would have been better off doing what I was purposing to do. And even at that point, even if I decided that I wasn't going to take interest in the program, maybe I find something else I wanted to do, I still know that following that, bare minimum, I go to school there, my gen eds are taken care of, so I don't have to worry about my gen eds. And then when I do go off to school somewhere else, maybe I have a better idea of what it is I want to do, and then I can go from there. And I'm not in debt. And I'm not saying this from the standpoint that debt is the only thing that bothered me. No, I'm not. But you get into the other aspect of the challenges of the process. Sometimes, the walls that we go through, the hurdles, the obstacles, all of that stuff might be necessary for one particular moment. And for me, like I said, even though the first school I went to, it was a great experience. I had a lot of fun, learned some stuff. I was able to figure some things out, and all of that. In the grand scheme of things, the one lasting thing I think the one most important thing I got from there came out of one class. And I think about all of the debt that I went through for that one class. And I have to ask myself, was it necessary? It might not have been necessary, to be perfectly honest, but if I had to think about it, like, would I do it all over again for that one class? If it gets me to where my purpose is, then yes, it was worth it. And you think about, we use the example of Joseph, we use the example of David. The woman with the issue of blood is another great example of this. Here's a woman who, for 12 years, had this, this issue, this discharge problem. And you're talking about having to deal with all of the awkwardness of that situation. And for her to be in a position to say, okay, Jesus is coming, and all I'm going to do is touch the hem of his garment. I hear he's this guy, and I can fulfill purpose. I can just get the healing that I need from him. He doesn't have to see me. I don't have to see him. Just touch the hem, I get healed, I go live life. It is what it is. And all of the pain, the frustration, the inconvenience, the ups, the downs, the pushing, the shoving, and everything else. At the end of it all, she gets to him, she touches him, she's healed, they have a moment, her life has changed forever. But for the sake of all of what she had to go through, was it necessary? Was it worth it? And for her, the answer to that was definitely yes. Right? And for a lot of us, we think about, what that might look like. And yeah, I know I'm kind of deviating now at this point, but you think about what that might look like. For a lot of us, we go through our barriers, our walls, our setbacks, our drawbacks, our ups, our downs, our detours, our reroutes. And, if we think about it and all of the stuff that we're going through, all of the inconveniences, if all of that leads to just one moment that helps us get, a life-changing experience, is it worth it? A lot of us will say yes by default, but, think about what we would really have to go through in that process. Would that really be worth it? And I think about that. I think about that process. If I had to take that experience all the way over again and do the same things, or, at least in general, would I do it? I would say yes. Obviously, I would navigate my collegiate experience there a lot different, but I definitely would make sure before I left that school, I took that class again. Hands down. That class was one of the foundational pieces that helped me to, really find my purpose, my true purpose, or accept it. I'll say that. Because without it, this doesn't happen. The blog doesn't happen. The ministry doesn't, start to become what it's, becoming. And when I say ministry, I'm not talking like I have a church and, I'm building members and all that. What I am saying is just my calling and my purpose in general. The healing doesn't happen, and a whole bunch of other things don't happen as a result of, taking that class. Because, I'm in a different place. But I am thankful for it, Aside from all of that, one of the other things that we can utilize to help us outside of that one moment, is a support network. Right? We need people along with, our mentors, to help us, make sure to keep us in check, to hold us accountable, and that's, again, something that if we're utilizing them the right way and they're doing what their purpose to do, they're going to keep us in line. They're going to motivate us. guide us down the right path necessary. When we get into aligning our work, jobs, with our beliefs, our deepest beliefs, we want, again, to be reminded that we're integrating the faith aspect with the work aspect. Doing what we're purposed to do, and doing so in the workforce, whatever that may be, necessary. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be in corporate America. It doesn't mean that we have to be, the blue collar guys. But what it does mean is we're presenting ourselves with an opportunity to align what God says we're supposed to do with what God gave us. Okay? And living out our values in terms of what we're doing is very much so important. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of us really do struggle, with the idea of, just kind of doing what we have to do to survive. Sometimes we get stuck in a job. We'll keep working the job because it pays well. Oh, this job pays 6 figures, so I'm going to keep working this job because it pays 6 figures, but my core values are compromised. I can't, I can't tolerate the X, Y's, and Z's and, these things, but because of the paycheck, I'll stay. And I'll just have to endure this as long as I can. And sometimes that long as I can might end up being 25, 30 years of your life because you really didn't want to let it go. And there was something better for you. Being in the military, I really thought I was going to be able to push out 20. I was kind of wishy-washy about it at certain points because of certain things that happen in life. But when, I got back and focused on, okay, I'm going to ride this thing out as long as I can. I really thought I was going to, push it out to 20, 22 years and retire. But the longer I stayed in, and the more, I started to realize that this wasn't for me. It was time to step back, step away, move on, right? Because it's not worth the stress. It's not worth running into certain kinds of walls. And, one of the things that I was told when I first came into the military by a friend of mine that is he's a pastor, is I just need to stay in for as long as I need to get what I need to get. And it just so happened to be, my time had come to an end and I knew it. And I was able to accept it, and being in that place, knowing that was coming, it was easier to make the transition that way, as opposed to trying to fight to stay in. Because I know a lot of people that, will push that down because of the benefit you're thinking of on the other side. And while that might be great, you might find yourself in a place where you're compromised. Some people never come back from that compromise. I do have a lot of, I can't think of a lot of people in the service, people that have helped me, people that I've known, people that, have not, been able to come home. They cut their lives short, for lack of a better word. And again, that's not God's will and purpose. He doesn't want us pushing things past certain limits. He doesn't want us to, again, overstep, our time, overstay our time in a certain place. That's again why discernment is really necessary. That's why having that support system is necessary, because we don't want to put ourselves in that position. When we talk about being able to utilize our faith to guide our work, we go back again to what God's will and purpose is. Genesis 1:28. Be fruitful and to multiply. fill the earth and to subdue it, and to have dominion over everything on the earth. All of us, when we find that thing that allows us to be fruitful, which is abundantly productive, it allows for us to share that information with our brothers and sisters. Not only allows them to be fruitful, but we're now multiplying with knowledge. That also ties into the subduing. We'll get into that. When you talk about being able to multiply that knowledge and spreading that, as most people in multi-level marketing will talk about, is duplicability, or something to that effect. Then you're talking about being able to take this same system, the same method, and you're able to apply it, and give it to another person, and they're able to do the same thing. That same duplicatability, I think that was the word I was trying to say. That same duplicatability is what allows for us to take, in terms of our knowledge, our experience, our guidance, and to share it with other people, where they can find themselves doing the same thing. And not only is that being fruitful and multiplying, but that's also filling the earth with said information. And then getting into subduing, that's bigger than just, control. That is cultivation, that is teaching, that is sharing knowledge, that is teaching mastery, which is tied into dominion. Right? We think of dominion in terms of domination and the brute force, but dominion is also mastery and knowledge. So we're taking the knowledge that we're gaining and we're sharing it with others. And that same aspect of the faith that we're working with when we find ourselves in that purpose should allow us to help serve others. It should allow us to teach others on how to be ethical in decision making. And trust me, if you are getting into entrepreneurship in terms of following your purpose in connection with your faith, best believe you need to know what those verses are, because the last thing you want to do is cheat people, because you're only doing that really to hurt yourself without realizing. And then you also want to allow for equality, certain equalities, or social justice. Right? And this doesn't mean that we're all having to go out and we just quit our jobs and we go work at the soup kitchen. Right? This is tied into anything. I think another one of the things that hurts us when it comes to just navigating this spectrum, if you will, is we think very one-dimensional. Right? It has to follow the rules and the guidelines. So it has to hit the consciousness of what it is to be a follower or a believer. No, it has to be what God says it needs to be. If you are great at teaching young kids on how to develop discipline by playing soccer, then go and do that. That is your calling. You have an influence of teaching certain types of, ethical decision making, right? Discipline through sport. Take that, develop that, cultivate that. That's how that works. Maybe again, you're the type of person that you can show a person exactly what the image is going to be, or what the process is supposed to be. And that might be you being a manager at a store. That's okay. You be the manager and you create this vision, and it allows people to come in and to see, and be influenced by that. That's fine, right? don't limit it to just thinking that you have to be in a certain avenue or a certain realm. Right? Don't do that, because God is not a limiter, if you will. Okay? Micah 6:8 says this: He hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. God knows what you need better than you know what you need. And all of the things that he's going to navigate you through, it's for a purpose. And in finding that purpose, he's going to allow for you to be able to utilize that experience to fulfill his will and purpose. Okay? All the ups and downs, the wins, the losses, right? The victories, the defeats, everything. All of that is necessary, right? And he's going to be there with you, right? As Joshua 1:9 states. I'm always going to be there, no matter where you go. Right? Proverbs 3:5-6 again. Trust in him in all your ways. Lean not onto your own understanding. Don't try to take and put matters into your own hands. He'll show you what you need to do. Let that be what it needs to be. Okay? When we talk about when we find that place, and again, we kind of alluded to this earlier. You know, you're gonna find that satisfaction when you find that calling. It's going to be like, you know, that refreshing moment, like finding that thing. That, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. Right? Like, you know, again, like defeating that boss after trying for X odd number of times on the video game, or maybe getting that, you know, maybe you getting the benefit or having a bonus, or, you know, something that you really weren't looking forward to, or the moment that you have an epiphany, or the moment that something clicks, or whatever the case may be. When you experience that thing and it hits, you know. And that's the beauty of knowing that you're in God's purpose, because it's motivating. You want to do it. You look forward to it. You don't want to mess it up. You find yourself saying, I gotta do this, no matter what. Right? And you'll get motivated. You'll continue wanting to do it, and you're not thinking about it. And that's the idea or the concept of it not being considered work, because you're passionate about it. But don't get it twisted, and don't think that means that, you know, you're not supposed to, again, be compensated for this either. Right? Unless you're doing real volunteer work, then obviously that's different. But if you're talking about, I'm taking what God has gifted me, and this is me utilizing what God gifted me to take care of, you know, what responsibilities I have, that's what we're doing, okay? And I know for a lot of people, we get into, well, you know, what about the notions of, you know, morals and values? You know, the certain things aren't supposed to be given away, or they're not supposed to be, you're not supposed to use for your own gain. I understand what you're saying. I think one of the great ways that this was expressed comes from a specific pastor that made it known, right, that you're not supposed to, when it comes to the Word of God, right, you're not supposed to, you know, you're not supposed to get paid off of it, right? And I do understand that. I do, right? But when you talk about, again, what your purpose is, I might be full-time ministry, so that's my thing. But I might also have a business, then my business is, the books, but the business could be, lectures, or the business could be, seminars and things along that line. If I'm doing that, that's part of the business. If on the surface it looks the same, that's, I'm not trying to be deceptive. Like, it is what it is, but I'm also doing what it is on purpose to do. I'm not trying to deceive you into thinking that you need, you have to pay me for a work. Right? But there are people that do utilize that in other capacities too. They're stuff along that line. But again, we don't want to do that. And like I said, when you talk about getting into entrepreneurship, you do want to read about verses that talk about doing business. I do recommend a lot of the Old Testament, the first 5 books in particular, that talk about the different things that you're doing in business. Because again, you don't want to find yourself on the wrong side of God's will by being selfish. Okay. One of the things that we have to bear in mind when it comes to that, because that same guy also talks about, for those pastors, they need to get a job, right? Work a regular job. There's a difference between working a job and operating in a calling, right? And again, if me giving out all of my insight, if me giving out the skills, the experience, the cultivation, and all of that, if I'm not supposed to benefit from that standpoint, then why am I, outside of serving God's will and purpose, how then should I sustain myself? And again, sometimes you get into that place, and then again, this is where the job aspect comes into play. Working the job, if we're really fixated on working the job from that standpoint, you can find yourself 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week working. And so how are you supposed to do that and still be the, quote, shepherd if you're, say, a pastor, right? That's not, unless God gives you the grace for that's probably not, right, what he wants, right? Because it's his will at the end of the day. And again, we have to take into consideration too, you talk about Matthew 6. He'll take care of those needs, right? And that provision might be that, right? Some people take donations. They might not have a set price. They might take donations. That's okay. That's acceptable, right? Some people have, some people operate in their purpose where, on one side, they're utilizing God's will and they're taking their same skills in a professional standpoint, and this is how they make their living. I know a lot of people that do that. In fact, I'm actually in the process of learning from some people who are in that realm. They've held on to certain positions, and those positions do require them having to work. It's not just I'm just holding a position because that's a title in the body. And these are positions that are tied into the movement, right, for the body, like certain there are districts for certain different types of denominations and things of that sort. You have that, and people holding those positions, they're responsible for certain things, making sure certain events are putting together, scheduling, being a liaison for different aspects, being responsible for specific regions, and a whole bunch of other things. Yeah, there's real life, there's real life activity in terms of work going on there. And again, you can find fulfillment in that too. And that again, that's perfectly fine. Right? We don't have to, again, keep it limited to thinking that, oh, well, because it's because it's the ministry, I just have to, I just have to struggle, be broke, be poor, or, because it's my calling, I'm, this isn't an opportunity for me to grow, or this isn't an opportunity for me to make a living off of. No, that's not true. And there are passages and stories in the Bible that talk about that kind of thing too. And again, this is God's purpose, right? God wants us to be able to take care of our responsibilities here. He's not going to put you in a position where he's going to give you something that you can benefit from, and then you're saying no, you don't want to do that. God's presenting you that opportunity to take it, but not at the risk of cheating the people, right? Don't take advantage of it. And again, there's Bible verses about that too. And embracing all of this, to conclude, we want to make sure, again, that we trust God's plan. God is going to showcase to you what you have to do and how he wants you to do it. We just have to be sensitive enough and discerning enough to recognize what that is. Right? That means we have to listen to the inner voice. We have to listen to the Holy Spirit. We have to have that time away from everybody else. We have to know what motivates us, what moves us, what gets us going. Right? That's all necessary. We can't allow everybody to dictate to us what we're purposed to do. Right? And we can't allow ourselves to be narrow-minded or tunnel vision into thinking that there's only a handful of things that we can do because of what society says. We want to make sure, and I encourage you guys to embrace your path, your full, faithful path. Even if you don't know what you're trying to do, again, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not unto your own understanding. If it takes you a minute, let it be what it needs to be. If you're going through everything for just one moment, let it be. It's all going to be worth it in the end, right? God knows what's best for us better than we know what's best for us. Okay? Trust that process. It's necessary. Utilize your lessons along the way to help others. You'll be surprised as to how many people you'll find along your journey are also looking for that guidance. And you being their moment helps spark them to become who they're supposed to be. So let's go ahead and embrace that path. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, I thank you for this opportunity to learn about finding fulfillment in our purpose. I pray, God, that we are able to analyze and look at our lives and, think about where we're trying to go, what we're trying to do. And God, if we find ourselves not where we need to be, I pray, Father, that we make the necessary changes. We take the necessary detours. If where we are is necessary to get to the next place, then allow us to have the grace to be able to navigate in that process until we get to the next point. If we've overstayed a specific place, God, you correct our course so we can get back online. God, I pray that we find ourselves being able to be reflective and looking back and thinking of and seeing the things that are necessary for us to become, again, who we're purposed to be. I pray, Father, that we find that fulfillment, not just for our own personal satisfaction, but again, for your will. I thank you, Father, for you being who you are. All these things I ask in your holy and heavenly name. Amen. And I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for taking the time to come out and listen to us. Like I said, I pray that this finds you well, and I really hope that this becomes something that you can come back to, like to find inspiration. Understand that finding that fulfillment is a process, and it's okay if that process takes a minute. It's okay if you're not where you think you need to be, but do know that when that moment comes, take advantage of it and do what God purposed for you to do. Okay, I love you all, and I want you all to succeed. I pray that you find your purpose. And until next time, this is the Rebuild Podcast. Peace.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. Tune in weekly as we dive into topics such as finding your calling, overcoming obstacles, building resilience, and strengthening your relationship with God. If you're ready to embark on a transformative journey of faith and personal growth, then join us on the Rebuild Podcast. Together, let's build a solid foundation that aligns with God's will and leads us to a life of purpose and fulfillment.